Newsy is a surprisingly controversial ship in the Murder Drones fandom. Despite the two being portrayed as perfect for each other and the ideal couple in the show, many people believe that their relationship is actually unhealthy and that Uzi is abusive towards N. However, is this true, or is it just another case of the fandom demonizing a female character? In this video, I'm going to be going over the three most common reasons that lead people to this conclusion that Uzi physically abuses N, verbally abuses N, or that she takes advantage of or exploits him, to see if any of these arguments are true and if Uzi is actually an abuser. One of the most common reasons you'll see for people believing Uzi is abusive is that she physically abuses N, hitting and slapping him in a way similar to Jay. However, when you look at these moments in the show, you realize that this point is the embodiment of making a mountain out of a molehill. The first time Uzi is really shown to do this is in Heartbeat, where after Thad gets dragged away by Eldritch J, Anne asks Uzi if she's good and she tells him to stop asking, pushing him to the ground and then asking for chainsaw hands. However, this is the only time she does this. Sure, you may say her elbowing him in the promenade is a sign of physical abuse, but that was very clearly affectionate. Uzi's hitting of N in Heartbeat is an isolated incident, not an establishing or continuing of a pattern of behavior. Plus, this is very early on in the series when she was just starting her arc. Later interactions between her and N show her as much more physically affectionate. Another common criticism of Uzi is that she verbally abuses or insults N. This one is weird to me, as it relies on having such a bad faith interpretation of her character that you have to take all of her lines in the worst context possible. Two common examples people use for this are what Uzi says at the end of Heartbeat and the Falling for You scene. At the end of Heartbeat, when N reaches out to Uzi, she flinches away and asks N what he is, referring to him as a thing. Now, without context, I can see how someone may come to the conclusion that Uzi is insulting N here. I mean, he's clearly upset and disturbed by her words. However, Uzi was also disturbed by what she said. In episode 3, after the flashback, we can see that her visor says guilt active. It's made clear as day, or I guess I should say night if you're a disassembly drone, that Uzi feels guilty for what she said to N. Also, it's not like her reaction in this scene is unfounded. She almost got killed by Eldritch J, got taunted by a hologram of her dead mom, got tricked by a hologram of N, and saw what she thought was her dad get ripped in half. I'm not even sure if she saw the hologram fizzle out, so it's possible that in that moment she still believed her dad was dead. Not to mention, Eldritch J came from Jay's corpse, so it's not surprising she'd associate it with N. Uzi isn't being cruel or insulting when she refers to N as a thing. She's reacting to a traumatizing event and several life-changing revelations that N may or may not be a part of. She isn't in the right headspace and she's saying things she doesn't mean. Even then, N doesn't take offense to her words. He doesn't harp on what she said or hold it over her head to make her feel guilty. He's more concerned about her well-being and that he may now fear him. Now, in the Falling for You scene, many people take Uzi calling herself gross for eating people and interpret it as her also saying N is gross for doing the same thing. However, once again, you have to consider their differing circumstances. N is a disassembly drone who's been killing and eating people his entire life and will literally die if he doesn't. Uzi understands this, never once blaming him for the murder and instead sympathizing with him, rightfully blaming his creators who made him like that in the first place. Uzi, on the other hand, is a worker drone who, under normal circumstances, wouldn't have to drink oil and had grown fleshy wings and a tail out of seemingly nowhere. When Uzi calls herself gross, she isn't insulting N for doing what he has to do to survive. She's insulting herself for being an outlier amongst her kind. Falling for You is a tragically underrated and misunderstood scene in the fandom, and this isn't the last time I'll be bringing it up in this video. Finally, another common criticism against Uzi is that she exploits Ed, and this criticism relies on misinterpreting a lot of their shared scenes, especially the Falling for You scene from episode 4. Many people see Uzi's behavior in this scene as manipulative, believing that she's playing the victim and trying to make N feel sorry for her. However, this idea is incredibly callous and compassionless when you consider the reason Uzi is acting like this. The mysterious program that her body had activated not long ago had caused her to develop a thirst for oil, which is basically worker drone blood, and now had made her grow fleshy wings and a tail, going on a rampage and killing 5 people, almost getting killed herself, and had to deal with the fact her classmates preferred the monsters who had been terrorizing their home for their entire lives to their relatively normal classmate they had known for years. Alongside her underlying insecurities and self esteem issues, it makes sense that she'd be nervous and genuinely worrying whether or not Anne still cared about her. When she asks if he's going to leave her, this isn't a guilt trip, it's a legitimate question from a scared girl. Many people also like to claim that Uzi is exploitative because she overly relies on N for comfort. However, when you look at the series proper, you realize that Uzi barely looks to N for comfort, and most instances of him comforting her are ones he initiated. He's the one who pats Uzi's head after her argument with Jay. He's the one who asks Uzi if she's okay after they're thrown to the ground by Eldritch Jay. He's the one who offers to go to prom with Uzi, and he's the one who, after Uzi calms down from her murderous high, takes them to the sky to talk. The only thing Uzi does that could be even remotely considered asking N for comfort is in Cabin Fever when, after becoming momentarily lucid, she asks V if she can talk to N, and even then, she doesn't ask to be comforted by him, she just asks to talk to him. Not to mention, Uzi does things to help N as well. In the pilot, not only does she wake him up to how poorly he's being treated, but in the bunker, she also encourages him to stand up to Jay. In promoting, she not only asks N to go to prom with her, but when she sees he's injured, tells him to stop sacrificing himself for her. In Dead End, she asks if everything is alright and comforts him when she can see he's stressed. In Mass Destruction, she not only hugs him, but also sacrifices herself so she doesn't get taken by sin. And finally, in Absolute N, when she sees N is having a panic attack, she snaps him out of it while also trying to ward off Sin's callback things. This doesn't feel like the kind of self sacrificing behavior you get from someone who is just looking to take advantage. Uzi barely looks to N for comfort while simultaneously doing a lot of things to help him. It's hard to look at her behavior and say that she's exploiting him. Uzi may be a messy and complex character, but to say that she's abusive is a stretch that relies on a lot of misinterpretation and bad faith assumptions. Honestly, I find it hard to take a lot of these points in good faith considering how biased of a perspective you have to think there's even a chance they could be plausible. In order to assume Uzi physically abuses N, you have to assume there are some unknown off screen instances of her hitting him. In order to assume she verbally abuses or insults him, you have to take a lot of her lines and scenes far out of their intended interpretation. And in order to assume she takes advantage of or exploits him, you have to have a completely bad faith interpretation of her character. Honestly, I think most of the people who decry Uzi as abusive or her relationship with N as toxic are just doing it because they want to be edgelord contrarians. Anyway, that's all from me. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all next time.